Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Alfredo Brown, joined as always by Dave Kluge. Today, we are going to be looking at our favorite late round targets in fantasy football drafts using the Football Guys consensus average draft position. You can find that over at footballguys.com/ADP. Dave, there's really not a whole lot to set up here because I think we both agree that when we talk about these late round targets, we just want to draft players that have high upside. And there's really no other nuance to it. You're not drafting for safety. You're drafting for players that can be one of the top weapons on their team. So let's do this. Before we even, before we start saying all these players, right? We're going to hop into it quickly. I want to let everyone know this Football Guys ADP that we're using. We get all of the information from ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, Sleeper, MFL, Underdog. So there's some best ball, NFFC. So there's high stakes drafts and more websites. So we are getting this info from all over the place. Definitely check that out. And that's what we're going to be using today as we talk about these players. So let's set the setting. Sure. Let's set the setting. Okay. Rounds 9 and beyond is where we're going to be looking at players in our fantasy drafts. Dave, why don't you kick us off with Marquise Brown going in the pick 905, ninth round, pick 5, wide receiver 47. Start us off with Marquise Brown.
That ADP is crazy to me. Absolutely crazy, Alfredo. When we were doing our mid-round show, I said, sweet, I'm going to talk about Marquise Brown. Then I went to footballguys.com/ADP and I said, wait, what? Marquise Brown is a 9th round pick? And I'm so plugged into best ball at this time of year. Just to give
Where he's like a 4th round pick, right?
He's a 4th round pick. Yeah, he's going at the end of the 4th round.
Oh, so, I was being facetious. Oh my God, he's actually a 4th round pick in best ball?
He is a 4th round pick in best ball right now. And okay. I got to say, we talk a lot about how wide receivers get steamed up. You can't always look at Underdog as like a direct example of what ADP is going to be when you're in your home league draft. But I think that they do get the positional stuff pretty spot on. When you start like folding wide receivers and running backs together, then it gets a little bit murky. But like right now, the consensus ADP for Marquise Brown has him as wide receiver 47. He's going as a top 30 wide receiver on Underdog, and I have him well inside my top 30. This is a guy that I've talked about a lot this offseason. So, we're kind of playing the hits here, Alfredo, as we get closer to the season. We've been studying all offseason, talking about players we like, and now we're starting to rehash some of these as we get some new audience members tuning in. But you look at what the Chiefs have done the last few years since Tyreek Hill has been gone, and every single wide receiver they have has been very limited in what they can do. A delineation in how these wide receivers were used, where last year, every single wide receiver had either an average target depth of more than 17 yards or less than 10 yards. They didn't have a single guy who could run a versatile route tree. It was either MBS and Justin Watson getting deep downfield, or it was Rashee Rice, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, whoever else was there, working underneath. Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney actually had the 2 lowest average target depths in the league. So they've been looking for a guy since Tyreek Hill has left who can do more than just one thing. A guy who can be a versatile receiver that can play inside, outside, deep, short, across the middle, outside, whatever it may be. That's exactly what Marquise Brown can do. If you look at his average target depth, you look at his slot alignment, you look at his ability to win in different parts of the field, his career has been kind of similar to what Tyreek Hill was during his time in Kansas City. So this is a guy that we know has displayed elite peripheral metrics during his time in Baltimore, but they just weren't passing the ball a lot. And then he also displayed elite peripheral metrics during his time in Arizona, but he was either injured or playing with scrub quarterbacks there. Now the stars are aligning, where a guy who has shown us that he has an elite profile as a receiver is on an elite offense with an elite quarterback and fits the exact need that this team has been looking for the last couple of years. Just absolutely crazy to me that average ADP right now, doubling down there, a little redundant, but ADP right now, average draft position, has him outside of the top 45 receivers. If that's where he's getting drafted in home league drafts on Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, wherever you're drafting, I'm not kidding when I say I will have Marquise Brown on 100% of my fantasy teams this year.
I'm just looking at highlight clips right now of Xavier Worthy on Twitter in Chiefs practice. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm not against this at all. I love your Marquise Brown take. I really do. I'm just every time you bring up a Chiefs receiver, I'm going to round robin it and just pick a different one that I'm in on. Because
Yeah, maybe
last
this is the
episode
year
it
for
was
Sky
Rashee
Moore.
Rice. Well, Kadarius Toney's playing running back now. He's gone
Yeah.
full Cordero Patterson.
Yeah, get ready to learn the Jareth McKinnon role, buddy. No, but
All
I
right.
mean, I wanna buy into the Chiefs offense, and I think that there's
Yeah,
so
why
much
not?
uncertainty here that people are just, like, fading everybody. Travis Kelce's a great value. Rashee Rice is a great value. Marquise Brown is a great value. And, if Xavier Worthy slides, I'll even draft some Xavier Worthy. Like, I just want a
You'll
part of
even do.
this Chiefs passing pie, and I think that the uncertainty about who the wide receiver 1 is gonna be has made all of these guys pretty good values.
And that was the thing right there at the end, is that the fact that we don't even know who the wide receiver one is for such a prolific offense and such a good quarterback makes them all worthy picks, pun intended.
Eh,
But I mean, like, these are all great picks in fantasy. So I'm not going to knock anyone for any of these picks, honestly. Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, go for it. Just go get your mans. That's it. Now, before I get to my first player, I just want to remind everybody you got a ton of ways to enjoy this show here on youtube.com/ at Football Guys Fantasy. If you're watching the video right now, please take a moment to like this video. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you're subscribed, because you are going to be getting these videos a day before they come out on the audio version on the podcast, where you can subscribe on either Spotify or Apple. And the audio version normally has an extra 10 to 15 minutes of bonus content there at the beginning. Now, we do have a Listener League giveaway exclusive to our YouTube subscribers, and we're going to be announcing the winner next Monday for a spot in our show's Listener League. And you know what, Dave? I want to let you pick the phrase today for the I'm surprising you right here on the spot. Let's see.
hmm.
How quick can you think of something? Because you've been on fire lately with Trendencies and Shred Zone. Just a word. Just give us a word.
Man, you're really putting me on the spot here.
I did. I really did.
Why would you do this to me? Why don't you listen to the podcast episode that came out earlier this morning and try to tie in our cold open in the
Oh, come
comments? Is that
on.
a little
That's
bit too much?
nuts.
I'm asking too
That's
much of people.
nuts.
All right.
How about this? Type in the comments average ADP. Go for
Average
that.
ADP.
Average
There you
ADP,
go. All right.
and put that in the comments and you will be entered.
That was a
Yeah.
sweat, man. Don't ever put me on the spot like that again.
That was like eggs and oats for you right there. Got you all nervous. That's a poo joke for anyone wondering. All right, let's move on here. I'm going to give you guys my first player that I love to draft here in late rounds. And it's Tyjae Spears, running back for the Tennessee Titans. He's got an average draft position going in the 7th pick of the 9th round as the running back 34. Let's just look at how he did as a rookie. As a rookie with Derrick Henry, he was on the field for 53% of the Titans snaps. He was top 10 amongst running backs in target share, targets per route run. And let's just not even talk about the data. He's just an incredibly talented player. This is a guy that I liked a lot coming out of college. I thought he'd be drafted a little bit higher. When he went to the Titans, I was kind of like, well, there goes that. He's not going to get on the field much except for passing down work. And then we all had this crazy moment in the offseason where we're like, yay, Derrick Henry's gone, Tyjae Spears. And then they signed Tony Pollard, and then we were sad again. But let's just take a moment. Get off the roller coaster. Take a moment. Let's look at the nuance of this, right? We know that targets are more valuable than carries. And we also get it. Tony Pollard's going to be on the field, and that's probably going to take away a few of the targets from Tyjae Spears. But these guys are interchangeable. And the thing here that has been pointed out over and over by these coaches is that these guys, it's not even a 1A, 1B. It's a 1A, 1A thing. Like, they truly see these two running backs as completely interchangeable. And when I look at the fact that Tyjae Spears was on the field for 53% of the snaps with Derrick Henry on the field, that gets me excited for how often he could be on the field with Tony Pollard out there. And I want to look here at his time with Will Levis, because that's going to be the quarterback here for the Titans. Okay. In 8 games with Will Levis, Tyjae Spears averaged 11 opportunities per game, and that was with Derrick Henry out on the field. So for me, seeing that we could get that up to maybe, let's say, 13 opportunities a game, just a little bit more with Derrick Henry off, I'm excited about that. And what this tells me is that Tyjae Spears has standalone value without an injury. It's not just all contingent upside. It's not just a guy that needs to be a backup and have the starter get hurt. This is a good player who's going to be on the field regardless. And even if he does get some of those targets taken away, Tyjae Spears running the ball is not a bad thing. Titans have an improved offensive line. You've got a player who's top 5 in explosive run rate. That's runs of 15 yards or more. And by the way, you want to hear the 4 names that were ahead of him, Dave, in explosive run rate? Devon Achane,
Hmm.
Jahmyr Gibbs,
Hmm.
Jalen Warren, and Christian McCaffrey. That's
Not
it.
bad company.
It's a hell of a list to be a part of. So for me, this is a win-win scenario. If the Titans are good, great. More scoring opportunities, sustained drives, better offense. That's awesome. If the Titans offense sucks, they're going to be forced to pass the ball a bit more, get Tyjae Spears involved, get him some easy targets, whether it's Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, whoever it is. I see Tyjae Spears as not only a guy who has a good floor, but has some very good contingent upside as well. So I love picking him in the ninth round.
Yeah, I mean, Tyjae Spears was great at Tulane, and I think a lot of people had him not far behind Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in this class. Of course, the concerns, he doesn't have an ACL. His knee is the main concern here, and that is why he slid into round 3 of the NFL draft. But I mean, the talent isn't a question, and I think. If you're talking about dynasty or whatever, you may have some long term concerns about that knee, but he is a great running back. He looked fantastic. I mean, he's just got that ability, that kind of that jitterbug type of movement where he is just bouncing around all over the field, and it seems like the defense just can't get a hand on him when he gets out in the open space. Like he is dangerous, and I think that it's tough to predict exactly how touches are going to be split between Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. But I don't think this is one of those situations where you have to plant a flag on one or the other. I think you can say that you're in on both players. Like they're both pretty suppressed in cost, that they are both good targets, in my opinion. But Tajay Spears having pretty much the same projectable range of outcomes as Tony Pollard and going a few rounds later makes him such an easy player to draft.
Now, if you're in your fantasy drafts, Dave, and you see something like this where you've got Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard, or even some of the next running backs that we're going to talk about, because there are these running back teammates that you can draft in different rounds and have them both in your team. It may not necessarily be a direct handcuff, but I just want to know, how do you like to approach that? Is this something where you say, like, I have to get those guys as a handcuff, or do you just say, you know what, this is a good situation, I'll just take both of them and just kind of hedge my bets here because I have so many picks and these guys are going so late?
Yeah, I think if it like falls into your lap, I'm not going to say that you should like avoid handcuffing your players, but it's not something that I prioritize. I'm not going to like reach rounds ahead to make sure that I can handcuff it. But like if I draft Tony Pollard and then 2 or 3 rounds later, Tajay Spears is sitting there, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. I saw a lot of people did that last year with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, where they would end up with both of those guys, and you were kind of getting weekly RB2 value out of both of those guys. I could see something similar from Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard this year, but really I'm trying to spread myself out in as many backfields as possible. And you'll also hear, like, as we're talking in the show, when we did favorite early round targets, I didn't mention a single running back. Today, we're talking favorite late round targets. 3 of the 4 guys that I'm talking about are running backs. Like, this is where, like, I can show you my Scott Fish team that I just drafted, where I didn't take my first running
Rather
back
if you
until round 9. And then 10 of my last 12 picks were all running backs, because these are the guys that we're going to be talking about. We're just the chaos of the NFL season can take over, and guys who aren't projecting for a lot of workload stumble into roles where they're workhorse running backs. These are the guys that you want to invest your late round picks in. So I don't like spending too many early round picks on running backs, because I want to save those, the positions. I want to save my running back spots for as many late round darts as I could possibly take. And I think Tajay Spears fits that mold. Like, one, you're drafting this guy, you know that even with Tony Pollard there, he can be an RB2 or an RB3. But in the event that Tony Pollard goes down, we could potentially be looking at top 5, top 10 upside from Tajay Spears. So these are absolutely the guys that I want to be drafting later in my drafts.
Yeah, 100%. Well, as you're talking here about some of these late round running backs, why don't we start talking about Blake Corum, running back for the Los Angeles Rams, who last season we just saw this Cinderella story of a season for Kyron Williams. And I think it leaves a lot of us wondering, could this just happen again this upcoming year with Blake Corum, who has so many similarities to Kyron Williams? And I mean, there are probably some people out there who looked at the draft profiles and said, Blake Corum was a better prospect coming out of college than Kyron Williams was. I mean, the draft capital would say that. A lot of the film would say that. The testing would say that. Now we just have to find out if the Rams believe that.
I wouldn't say that, like, obviously we could say Kyron Williams is a better player because of what he did his rookie season, and that's why he's getting drafted earlier. But if all we're doing is looking at the prospect profiles, what they did in college, their height, weight, speed scores, testing scores, combine scores, draft capital, all that stuff, Blake Corum is objectively a much, much, much better prospect than Kyron Williams was. And I don't think anybody is going to argue with that fact. But of course, we saw Kyron Williams break out at the NFL level, and that's why he's getting drafted where he should. Now, I feel like with so many of these situations where there's two running backs in a backfield, people feel it necessary to say, I'm in on this guy and I'm out on this guy. I love this running back and I hate this running back. And I don't think you have to do that. I think that Kyron Williams, like where he is falling to in drafts, is kind of a mid to late third round pick. I think that's totally a fair value. And I am in on Kyron Williams at that cost. I'm not aggressively reaching for him, but if I'm drafting at the end of the third round and Kyron Williams is there, I'm more than happy to take him. Blake Corum is a guy that I am aggressively trying to draft. Whether I have a zero RB, hero RB, robust running back, zero wide receiver, it doesn't matter. Blake Corum fits in just about any form or any style of team that you are building. The thing that I like about him is, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but there's so many ways that Blake Corum can pay off at his ADP, and I think we look at it as this like very linear, like you know, Kyron Williams is the running back, and if Kyron Williams gets injured, Blake Corum is going to be the running back. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. One, we could just look at Sean McVay bucking his historical trend. We've seen him kind of lean on one running back throughout his career as a head coach, but what if that changes this year? What if, spending that day two pick on Blake Corum says that we're going to split touches a little bit? And in that instance, we'd expect most of the goal line work, which is where so much of Kyron Williams' value came last year, to go Blake Corum's way. He's the bigger guy, the stronger guy, the guy with more burst. So that's one out for Kyron Williams or for Blake Corum to pay off, is just that Sean McVay kind of changes his tendencies. The other is that Kyron Williams gets injured. Of course, that would be the best case scenario for Blake Corum, where all of a sudden he's an 85% snap share player on the Rams. But there's also the slight possibility that throughout camp, Blake Corum just outplays Kyron Williams, which isn't crazy to think about. Or maybe it happens midway point through the season. So I don't think it's just this, Kyron Williams needs to get injured for Blake Corum to pay off. I think there's multiple ways that Blake Corum can find a path to outperforming his ADP. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with drafting Kyron Williams. I think that he is a fair cost right now, but Blake Corum going so much later in drafts and having the same upside as Kyron Williams, he's a guy that I'm willing to reach around ahead of ADP for to make sure I have on my team.
So the thing for me when I think about these running backs is I just want to think of running backs, one that not only can just get a workhorse load, but I think the really good thing here with Blake Corum, and honestly, you could say this with a lot of the rookie running backs. I think Trey Benson deserves to be on this list as well, and neither of us put him here.
Mhm.
Spoiler alert. But you want to find young running backs with fresh legs who can handle a full workload and actually be on a good offense. And that's not something we find all that often. Is when you can find that trifecta, that's it can pay off in such a big way. And Blake Corum is that guy that there's essentially no risk on him with where he's getting drafted.
Yeah. And I just right before we recorded Alfredo, I was recording with our friend JJ Zacharyson, and we talked about Blake Corum on that show, and we had a big long conversation about him. And JJ pointed out something that I thought was really interesting that I hadn't even thought about yet. Historically, we've always seen Sean McVay lean on one running back, and we say, well, that's what he does. That's what his tendency is. And I've thought a little bit that like good coaches are going to change up their philosophies and their schemes to their personnel, and they didn't accidentally like. It's not like they auto drafted Blake Corum by mistake, and they intentionally spent a day two pick on Blake Corum, and I don't think that they drafted him just to let him sit on the sidelines and wait for Kyron Williams to get injured. And what JJ pointed out is last year, in the handful of games that Kyron Williams was injured, he didn't just give 25 touches per game to Darrell Henderson or Royce Freeman or Ronnie Rivers or Zach Evans. When Kyron Williams missed last year, Sean McVay did kind of lean on a committee approach where more running backs were involved than just one guy. So that kind of tips his hat a little bit, like, or tips his hand a little bit. Like maybe in
He
years
could tip his
past,
hat.
maybe in years past we've seen Sean McVay really lean on one guy, but last year when they didn't have Kyron Williams, they did lean on a committee approach. So it's not crazy to think that now with two capable running backs, we might see McVay finally adopt a little bit more of a split backfield, especially last year when he tried giving Kyron Williams 25 plus touches a game. Kyron continuously got hurt, just kept picking up injury after injury after injury. So I think that's the thing that people aren't accounting for is a lot of people are viewing Blake Corum as a pure handcuff, but it's not crazy to think that there might be some standalone value here in a split backfield.
Whew. We did like 9 minutes on Kyron Williams and Blake Corum,
Well, I mean,
but it's good
Kyron
talk.
Williams is objectively probably like one of the most polarizing players in fantasy this year. Like
Yeah.
everybody has and I don't have a strong take on Kyron Williams. I think that he's appropriately valued, but my strong take is that Blake Corum is grossly undervalued.
And I just added an extra minute to it. So that's on me. That's on me. All right, let's go to the next player here. I want to talk about Jameson Williams, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. And honestly, it's hard for me not to talk about him. I've been eating a lot of crow over the first couple of years here of Jameson Williams' career. Who this is a guy that I liked a lot coming out of Alabama. And actually, I wasn't the only one. Like, it's not crazy. Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah, a bunch of the big name scouts had him as their wide receiver, as the wide receiver one in the class until he got hurt. And we have seen so many just weird circumstances happen with Jameson Williams, and then things where he just has not been able to progress in the NFL, whether it's been the injury, whether it's been suspension. He hasn't been on the field enough to practice and just get better as a pro. And right now, he's being drafted in the 9th round, pick 909 as the wide receiver 49. And Dave, it's hard to not get excited about all of the great glowing reports coming out of training camp right now, not just from Dan Campbell, but from Jameson Williams' teammates, Jared Goff and Amon St. Brown, talking about how he's going to have this amazing breakout year. They weren't saying that last year. Even the beat writers who have been very tough on Jameson Williams are saying he looks like a different guy. He's stronger, more explosive, better body control. Jameson Williams is out here in practice throwing up mid play and finishing it. I don't know if you heard that story where people were like, "You all right, man?" He's like, "Yeah, I just had a bad breakfast," and he just like kept practicing.
Well,
It was
to
very
be fair,
odd.
this is the guy who puts scoops of McFlurries on his McChicken, so maybe,
Did you
maybe he
also
needs to
see
take a
that he
closer look at his
puts?
diet.
Yeah, you also see he puts nacho cheese on hot Cheetos.
What are you guys doing? Like
I
DK
don't.
Metcalf out here living on Skittles and coffee? Like you guys, you're getting millions of dollars, and like your job is to perform well. Hire a nutritionist, hire a personal chef. Sorry, I'll get
This
off my
goes back. No,
soapbox.
this
Go
goes
ahead.
back to Ocho Cinco, Chad Johnson. He was
Yes.
doing this. He was out here touting McDonald's as like, I do this every day,
Yeah.
and it's just you see one person do it, and they just keep doing it.
Nah.
But listen, the thing with Jameson Williams for me is like we actually have to remember a lot of this time that he's been in the NFL and has not produced yet is actually time that he probably should have still been in college. If anything, he's actually still younger than rookie wide receivers that are in the league now. So Xavier Legette and Ricky Pearsall are older than Jameson Williams. This is a guy that has had uh, just not enough time out on the field. He's still getting better. He's still getting older. When we look back at last season, even just in the short amount of time, he was a wide receiver 3 or better in 42% of his games over the final 7 weeks, including a wide receiver 2 finish. He did that while playing less than 69% of the team's snaps. Obligatory, nice. And just in a very limited role, this is a guy like we know he has this penchant for explosive plays, but he was averaging a better fantasy points per route run, which is an interesting stat, better than Terry McLaurin, Garrett Wilson, Adam Thielen, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Marquise Brown. So while I'm not saying that's the end all be all, that means Jameson Williams, he's going to score a ton of points now that he has more opportunity. It's something that we should take note of. And when you're sitting here in the 9th round saying, okay, well, who can I draft with a bunch of upside and a good offense? Yeah, it's Jameson Williams. You got Josh Reynolds out of Detroit now. That leaves 4 targets behind. You add that to Jameson Williams near 3.5 per game. I know it's not this simple, so please don't make it out as I'm just saying, 1 + 1 = this, but there's a realistic path here for Jameson Williams to be getting 6 to 7 targets per game in a very good Detroit Lions offense. And he's an explosive playmaker. He's being drafted outside of the top 48 wide receivers, and he could very easily be finishing in the top 30 or even higher. So, Dave, I don't kind of, I really like Jameson Williams in the ninth round. My worry is that I think this ADP is going to continue to skyrocket as more of these camp reports come out, and we're going to see people get a little too excited. And I might be out on him if the price gets too high.
Yeah, I mean, where he's getting drafted right now, though, I'm very in. I've been
I love it.
drafting quite a bit of Jameson Williams, and it's so easy to contextualize the poor start that he's had to his career. He was drafted coming off an ACL, then he dealt with some other injuries after that, and then he had the suspension due to gambling. So he hasn't really had a fair chance to step on the field as a healthy full-time player in week one, and that's finally going to happen this year. And often we look at ACLs as just like, okay, you tear your ACL and in 9 months you're going to be back on the field and playing 100%, and that's not always the case. Like especially for a guy like Jameson Williams, who so much of his ability is predicated on his athleticism. This is a guy at his Alabama pro day. I don't know, remember off the. I think he ran a 4.34. Is that right, Alfredo? I mean, this guy just smoked his pro day. Like we know that he's a very fast receiver, and sometimes it takes time for that speed to come back after a serious knee injury like that. But we saw the speed showing up last year. Like he had that, I forget if it was a catch and run or a handoff. He had that one little dump off pass. I think it was a dump off pass that he took. You remember against San Francisco last year where he looked like he was shot out of a cannon. And I think everybody that saw that play was like, wow, that's the Jameson Williams we remember from college. So if he is able to regain that explosiveness that he had in college, there's no reason that he can't be a huge playmaker at the NFL level. We saw it in little flashes so far throughout his career, but now with, like you said, Josh Reynolds being out of the picture, it projects right now for Jameson Williams to be a full-time player on this offense. He might not give you a ton of consistency, but he has spike week potential just about every single week in this offense.
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more. Took the words out of my mouth here. It's a player with good draft pedigree, with obvious talent, hasn't had the opportunity to show it, and he's going to be in a good offense. So it fits the archetype of the players that we want to take shots on in these late rounds. Dave, let's take a look at another guy here. Running back, shocker by you, and it makes sense. Zach Charbonnet, running back for the Seattle Seahawks. He's being drafted in the middle, closer to the end of the 10th round. And this is a player that last season we were all drafting him a bit higher with expectations that he would be taking a lot of the work from Ken Walker. That has not happened. But as we've stated with a lot of these players, there is some fantastic contingent upside.
Yeah, and I'm gonna rehash a lot of the things that I said about Blake Corum. I'm gonna say about Zach Charbonnet as well. Like in a vacuum, you compare him to you look at what his prospect profile compared to Ken Walker. Like Zach Charbonnet was a great prospect, and we didn't see that turn into much his rookie season. But I'm just going back to the well on a player that I think is very talented. What we did see in little flashes with the touches that he did get his rookie season, he looks like he's going to be a good NFL running back. Like he was able to break tackles, he was able to shake defenders, he was able to catch passes, all the things that we wanted to see from him. He did. He just didn't really get the opportunity. And when he did get the opportunity, it was against the Rams and it was against the 49ers, and he had some tough starts ahead of him. And now, because of everything that transpired as a rookie, you're just getting the same player and the same upside that you saw last year, but at a significant discount now going into year two. Um, we could also look at a potential change in philosophy here. We got a new head coach. We've got Ryan Grubb taking over as the offensive coordinator. Last year, we saw it very much so leaning in Ken Walker's favor, but we could see that usage start to tighten up a little bit now. Really, there's the contingent upside, and we can go on and on about that. If Walker goes down, we're probably looking at Zach Charbonnet as a top 10 running back for the rest of the season. But there's also a world where, like Blake Corum could potentially do to Kyron Williams, Zach Charbonnet can carve out some high value touches for himself, be it as a receiver or near the goal line. So just a talented player on a good offense that has multiple outs, whether it be a change in coaching philosophy or whether it be an injury to Ken Walker. There are multiple outs for Zach Charbonnet to potentially outpace his ADP.
Yeah, you mentioned the change in the offense here, and it's not just that we get this new offensive coordinator and that he might prefer one player or the other, but it's also the philosophy change that he will want to pass the ball to the running backs quite a bit more. And that was something that was talked about quite a bit with Zach Charbonnet coming out of UCLA, is that he can catch the ball and he actually can make moves out in the open field. Now, he's not quite as explosive as Ken Walker, but
I,
he is a sure-handed player.
I think I was on with Chris Harris a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about Zach Charbonnet, and he said that Zach Charbonnet is a guy who thinks he's much better in the open field than he actually is. You'll see him
Yes.
one on one with a safety, and he'll kind of like shake his hips and then just get leveled. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't necessarily realize how big and strong he is sometimes. Like I would like to see Zach Charbonnet just drop his pads and run through that safety rather than trying to shake him out of his cleats. Hopefully that's something that he can learn, as he progresses in his NFL career. But you talk about the targets going to running backs in the Ryan Grubb offense, and you look at what these guys did comparatively in college. Zach Charbonnet pulled 3 times the target share in college than Ken Walker did. So I think people look at Charbonnet and they see this big bulky guy and they think that he is just a between the tackles bruiser, but he is a shockingly polished route runner and he's got some soft hands as well. So he's one of those guys I think that can surprise a lot of people in the pass game if that starts to grow in this new offense.
Yeah, and we can absolutely see that for him. I want to talk about a wide receiver here who the pass game in his offense may not be growing, but his role is likely growing. And it's Khalil Shakir, wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. And I've talked about him a couple times this offseason. And Dave, I know you are also in on Khalil Shakir at his current average draft position. He's going in the 10th round, guys, as the wide receiver 54. It's basically just a free pick here. And this is a guy who could be the wide receiver one for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And that's just nuts to me. We keep pinpointing this every time we talk about Dalton Kincaid, that the Bills do not have Stephon Diggs. They do not have Gabe Davis. And that's more than 50% of last year's targets just vacated, up for grabs. And Khalil Shakir is a guy that not only has he just proven that he is incredibly consistent, but it's actually been said over and over by offensive coordinator Joe Brady that he is as consistent as they come. It's I just want to point this out. Okay, so among all wide receivers with at least 40 targets last season, Khalil Shakir was first in yards per target, second in passer rating per target, first in on-target catch percentage, and first in positive play percentage. I mean, it just shows how much Josh Allen trusts him, how much the coordinators trust him. And this is a guy that I think a lot of us look at him and say, "Oh, he's a small fella. He plays in the slot."
He's a
When really
dog.
in college, yeah, he's a dog with a W. And in college, that's not what he did. He didn't play in the slot. He played outside. He can do a lot of the same things that a guy like Deontay Johnson can do. So I think we're going to see a lot of we're going to see a little bit of like an NBA style thing with the Bills offense here. You're not going to see guys with positions. They're going with positionless offense. And I think we're going to see that a lot of Dalton Kincaid on the outside, Curtis Samuel in the backfield, Khalil Shakir moving from slot to outside. Everyone's all over the place. And the additions on this team, Keon Coleman needs a ton of work, route refinement, and that has been talked about a lot by the coaches here in preseason and during not preseason, but during training camp. That he's going to take some time. It's going to be some work. Like, we may not see him starting for this team for a little while. We may not see him be participating in a lot of routes for a little while. So Khalil Shakir, very likely the wide receiver one on this team. And I'm just excited about what he can do. He's great after the catch. Joe Brady loves doing that. Dave, last season when Shakir had at least a 60% snap share, he averaged 4 catches, 61 yards. He was a wide receiver 3 or better in nearly 60% of his games. I'm just excited to see that this is a guy who you're drafting him once again in the 10th round as the wide receiver 54, and he could potentially be giving you, I don't know, what would be fair to say? Do we want to say wide receiver 3 value?
I mean,
Maybe better?
I think the ultimate upside here, like if Khalil Shakir went for like 1,100 yards this year, it wouldn't surprise me all that much. Like the passes have to go somewhere. We know Josh Allen is going to throw for 4,000 plus. Like you start working out the projections and how they're going to work, and yeah, I mean it could just be one of those offenses where there's just like a bunch of guys catching for 600 to 800 yards and no real true wide receiver one. But I think it's possible that Khalil Shakir could be the wide receiver one and could break out. You talked about his abilities after the catch. And on the show that we did a couple days ago, when I talked about Rashi Rice, I said, Debo Samuel led the league in yards after the catch per reception. Rashi Rice was number two. Khalil Shakir was number 3. And he did that with a deep target depth as well. Like he's not getting fed these little gimmicky touches near the line of scrimmage. He's catching balls deep downfield, and then he's making plays after the catch. I mean, there are so many numbers when you start looking at Khalil Shakir. Number 1 in quarterback rating per target. Like when Josh Allen was targeting Khalil Shakir, they had the best connection of any quarterback wide receiver duo in the NFL last year. He was number 1 in yards per target. He was number 2 in fantasy points per target. You look at the games with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator, he had 4+ targets in 4 of 7 of those games. So he saw his usage roll while he was still being wildly efficient. I know everybody's in on Curtis Samuel. Everybody's in on Keon Coleman. I expect Khalil Shakir to be the wide receiver 1 here, and you're drafting him as the 4th pass catcher in Buffalo.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think people see upside elsewhere with Keon Coleman, who I don't think will be on the field as much as we want him to.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people are holding on to this notion that Curtis Samuel was really good when he was in Carolina with Joe Brady.
4 years ago,
Sure,
and he went
sure,
for
bub.
800 yards.
Yeah, this was a very different world 4 years ago. Everything has changed.
Uh-huh.
Nothing is the same as it was 4 years ago.
Christian McCaffrey was injured and Curtis Samuel was getting snaps out of the backfield. Like that was the best season we've seen from Curtis Samuel. And it was 4 years ago, and he was a back end wide receiver 3. Like I don't expect him. Like I think Curtis Samuel's a good football player. He's fun. He's versatile. He's going to get all sorts of creative touches. But if there's one guy that can be like a pure wide receiver 1 who is just beating coverage and getting deep and making plays after the catch, that, in my opinion, is Khalil Shakir.
Yep, yep, I'm with you on that. All right, I'm so excited because we get to finally talk about a Miami Dolphin, Dave. It's basically we've only ever seen that we've got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua Tagovailoa, Devon Achane. It's the big guys at the top, and then you get a little bit of like fun sleeper stuff again with Raheem Mostert. But I'm so excited that we get to talk about rookie running back Jaylen Wright for the Miami Dolphins. Dave, he's being drafted in the 13th round as the running back 50. And I'm wondering, could we just be seeing another version of Devon Achane or another version, probably more accurate, another version of Raheem Mostert
Yep.
being added to this offense? And we keep using this terminology here, contingent upside, but these late rounds are littered with it. If you're going to be making these picks anyways, they might as well be worth something and have some crazy upside.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious what Miami's doing. Like, you don't have to be like, a film nerd to like understand what Miami's doing. They want to stretch defenses both vertically and horizontally as much as possible, and then they want to get their balls to the guys that have
You know,
blazing speed, and that's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright, or Devon Achane, and then of course Jalen Wright. And I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but every now and then I'll puff my chest out and say that I made a good call. And last year I was all in on Devon Achane, and I tweeted out the night of the draft. I said Devon Achane is tailor made for this Miami offense.
hey,
And
hey, include me with that too. Okay, we did an episode.
oh, were you tweeting from my account? Oh, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, we
No,
both we both liked Devon Achane
let's
last
go.
year.
Give me some flowers, dude. Pat my back, I pat your back.
There you go, buddy. Um,
Yeah.
but no, I mean
This was a low moment for the show right here.
that was
Air
embarrassing.
pats.
Uh,
Air pats stupid.
Julia, cut this out in post.
Yep.
We don't want this on the show.
Nope.
But yeah, everything I said about Devon Achane last year, I'm just gonna kind of rehash and say about Jalen Wright this year. This is a guy who's got blazing speed, and like I said, what this Miami offense does is they get their guys out in space. Last year, Devon Achane averaged 1.6 more yards per contact per attempt than any other running back in the league. Christian McCaffrey was in second place, by the way. Devon Achane was getting on average 4.7 yards downfield before a defender was getting a hand on him. If you allot that same type of opportunity to Jalen Wright, I mean, he's going to have a Devon Achane type of season where he is just going to rip off big plays. This is a guy who ran a 4.38 40-yard dash compared to Devon Achane, who's 4.32. So yeah, Devon Achane has the slight edge there. But then you look at Jalen Wright in comparison to Devon Achane, 2 inches taller and 25 pounds heavier. So you look at the size adjusted speed score, Jalen Wright is inside the 90th 95th percentile. His burst score is also inside the 95th percentile. This is a guy who has blazing speed on a running back on a team that runs the ball very effectively. I don't know, man. I'm not overthinking it here. I think you said it best. Like, could this just be Jaylen Wright? Or I'm sorry, I keep flip flopping their names. Just
Raheem
like, could this
Mostert.
just be Devon Achan all over again, or Raheem Mostert all over again? And I absolutely see it that way. And Raheem Mostert's getting up there in age. He might take on some of the early season work, but I think that we see those scales start to tip in Jaylen Wright's direction. And I think the long term plan here is to have that kind of, I don't want to say thunder and lightning approach, because Jaylen Wright has plenty of lightning himself, but he's the bigger, heavier guy who can kind of get it done between the tackles as well. I think what we saw from Devon Achan is like they don't want to give this guy 20 touches per game. His body can't handle it. He's going to break down with that sort of usage. So I think that we're going to be looking at probably like 8 to 12 touches per game to Devon Achan. We can see that role kind of Raheem Mostert holding on to the role that he had early in the season last year. But I think that we just see Jaylen Wright progressively grow his role as the season goes on. And I think that it wouldn't surprise me one bit if towards the back half of the season we actually see Jaylen Wright out touching all of the other running backs in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that it's not new for us to see this type of offense working with multiple running backs. We saw it for years in San Francisco when Mike McDaniel was there. We even saw it when he showed up in Miami, where you had Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. And it was just all these discount running backs that Miami was making productive for fantasy football. And then Devon Achan just burst onto the scene, and he's got speed and talent unlike anything that they've really had in that backfield. Well, now you get Jaylen Wright, who does a lot of the same things. And I'm really excited to see what happens there, because Miami just spent this whole offseason adding more playmakers to the offense, which might not necessarily be what they needed, but damn it, if it's not going to be really fun, hashtag sorry, Joe. All right, let's go to our last player here. And this is a guy I think Dave, both of us really like. And it's because of not just his talent, but the running back that's in front of him. And I want to talk about Ty Chandler, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. He is being drafted in the middle of the 11th round as the running back 44. And when I look at this, I see Ty Chandler as nearly the same thing as Tyjae Spears, who we talked about earlier, who's getting drafted 3 rounds before. Now, Tyjae Spears is in a sort of split back situation where Chandler is the clear backup here. So I get the 3 round discount here on his price. But Ty Chandler is an incredibly talented player who, honestly, a lot of us were wondering if he was going to be getting the full bell cow role there in Minnesota. Last season, Ty Chandler's top 15 in explosive run rate. Just for those who need the reminder, that's runs that go for 15 yards or more. So you start to look at the explosive playmakers throughout the NFL. And when Ty Chandler is listed on that, and he's included with some of those bigger names like Devon Achan and Christian McCaffrey and a bunch of the running backs that we mentioned before, yeah, Ty Chandler is going to be getting his snaps no matter who the starting running back is there in Minnesota. And speaking of that starting running back, it's Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, 29-year-old Aaron Jones, who, Dave, anyone that plays not just redraft, but dynasty football knows where the age cliff is for running backs. It's 29 years old. You see a very sharp decline. This is also a player who's coming off of a season where he missed 6 games last year. He struggled with injuries throughout the season. Now, he had a great playoff performance. So this is a guy who's not completely lost a step, but I wouldn't be surprised if these injuries do start to catch up to Aaron Jones. And that could open the
I mean,
door for
I
Ty
think they already
Chandler.
have. I don't think you have to say
I'm,
like these
I'm
injuries.
saying
Like
more so.
they
I'm
caught up
saying more
last
so.
year. Yeah, I mean
Well,
he
it's so when he was on the field, though, Aaron Jones showed, at least towards the end of the year.
yeah.
I'm trying to give him his flowers
He
too.
no,
At the end of the year,
he
he was
looked
good in
great
the
at the end
playoffs.
of the season, but he
Right.
missed like almost the entire regular season. Like he was banged
Yeah,
up
I talked
with that
about that,
same
Dave.
yeah.
Pay
And
attention to the
that's what I'm
show,
saying.
man.
All I'm saying is like you're saying the injuries could catch up to him. The injuries have
Oh,
caught up with him for the last 3 years.
I'm not saying the injuries catch up to him where he misses games. I'm saying the
Yeah.
injuries catch up to him where even if he doesn't miss games, his play could decline much further than what we've seen in the past, especially with the age now.
Mhm.
And to me, that's what could open the door for a guy like Ty Chandler, who, when he gets into that expanded role, we saw that over the final month of the season, getting 64% of the snaps. And that was with a healthy Alexander Madison. I can't really say that with a straight face, but he's getting 64% of the snaps, averaging 15 touches, 82 yards. He was the running back 16 in fantasy. So it's a guy that you're drafting as running back 44, but you know that he's got top 20, potentially even top 15 upside at the running back spot. This offense could actually be tailor made for a running back that, like Ty Chandler, that can just not necessarily carry a load, but be explosive with less carries. So I'm excited to see what he does. And man, just to be able to get him at the 11th round draft cost, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Chandler was one of my favorite guys last offseason. I was talking about him like as soon as Minnesota Vikings played their first game in week 1, I was saying Alexander Madison looks terrible. Let's see what Ty Chandler can do. And Paul Charchian, friend of the show up in Minnesota, like I know he was clamoring for Ty Chandler as well. It was one of those things that like everybody wanted to see what Ty Chandler can do, and it took Kevin O'Connell forever to finally make that change. But when he did, like Ty Chandler was very, very clearly the better running back. And we never really saw him with a full workhorse role. He was always kind of held at bay by Alexander Madison, and that could be the case here. But like you said with Aaron Jones, like those hamstrings have just been hanging on by a thread for the last couple of years. And I think it's you'd never want to bet on injury, but I'd guess that Aaron Jones does miss some time, and when he does, the runway is going to be clear for Ty Chandler to take off, a guy that I've just been pounding the table for since he came into the league. Just so excited to see that the opportunity could probably be here this year. So, um, uh, you know, I think we are 4-4 on agreement on this show. I agree with all of your guys. I didn't get much pushback from you on my guys.
No,
And I
I
think
agree
that
with
we
you
all
guys.
have, this was a very running back heavy show because when you're drafting these guys, you're not drafting them for week 1 projectable volume. You're drafting these guys knowing that they are talented and that they're young and that they could find themselves in a bigger workload as the season goes on. That's exactly what happened last year with Ty Chandler. Basically worthless for the first half of the season, and then really picked up steam as the season went on. Zamir White was another guy that we were telling you to draft last offseason and didn't do anything for the first 12 weeks, and then was a legitimate league winner down the stretch. And right now, if we tell you to draft Blake Corum and we tell you to draft all these guys that we've talked about on the show today, don't go like blowing us up on Twitter when it's week 3 and these guys aren't getting touches, because these are long plays. Like you draft these guys knowing that their opportunity could arise at some point in the season. So again, we'll kind of talk about the roster construction and game theory that we talk about a little bit. On my bench, I want my bench to be like 80% of these types of running backs, these young, talented, athletic guys that are an injury away from a bigger workload. This is exactly how you should be spending all of your late picks in drafts.
If you do get angry and you do want to blow up on Dave on Twitter, that's fine. Just
I'm
don't do
used
it
to
to
it.
me. I'm too
I'm
soft. I
dead
can't handle
inside.
it.
You can say whatever you want to me. I don't even feel it anymore. I'm dead inside when it comes to Twitter.
No, I'm way too soft. I'm way too soft. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. All right, well, we're gonna be back on Monday with another episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Football Guys news update, where you get everything that you need for your fantasy football team and all the news from the preseason sent straight to your email inbox directly from Joe Bryant himself. As always, thank you guys for watching. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.